Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the channel. I am Megan, the Healing Foods Coach, and I'm so glad that you've come back to join me and watch this content. For all the new subscribers, I thank you. For all of my loyal, longtime subscribers and followers, thank you as well. So, today's topic, does everyone have to be carnivore? And I really want to dive into that one quickly because I think it's really important to answer the question and speak to that point. So let's get started. First of all, what does it mean to be a carnivore? Technically speaking, a carnivore is anyone who gets at least 70% of their dietary food intake from animal sources of protein and fat. So you can absolutely be a carnivore and still include vegetables and some fruits, okay? If you are getting 70% or more of your food sources coming from an animal of some sort, their muscle meat, their associated fats, any of their byproducts, for example, milk or dairy products from that milk, things like eggs, you are a carnivore. So that means even if you decide you want to keep in the low carbohydrate, non-starchy vegetables, maybe have the lower carb, lower sugar fruits, like particularly berries, maybe some sour apples, that type of thing, go for it. You are still a carnivore. Now, many people think that to be carnivore, you have to give that all up, and you can only have the animal products. And that if you have no issues with vegetables or things like berries, somehow you're not allowed to have them. That is not true. Okay. There are different degrees of carnivore. Now, there are those who have such incredibly sensitive guts, have so many intolerances and such severe histamine reactions that they have to be as strict as they absolutely can. And they've, through the process of elimination, they have taken out everything other than possibly red meat, whether that's beef or lamb or bison. They may be able to include goat as well, ruminant animals, basically, salt and maybe water. And example, the example that comes to my mind of somebody like that is Michaela Peterson, who suffered with severe rheumatoid arthritis for her whole life and had to get everything else out of her diet because she simply does not tolerate seasonings and spices and any sort of vegetable, even the low carb ones. They caused her to have a histamine response and inflammation. So she had to get all that out. Okay. And I know she's thriving and she's doing super well. That is what she eats. And that's what you would hear referred to as the lion diet, because lions eat animal meats. Of course, they drink water, and that's it. They don't have other things in their diet because they simply don't. So hence the term the lion diet, eating like a lion would, with the exception being that they don't use a knife and fork. And chances are, if you've got a nice ribeye, you're probably going to have a knife and fork to cut it up and put it in your mouth. Okay. That is the lion diet, which is a form of carnivore. Then we have those who are still fairly restrictive, but allow other things into their diet. So perhaps they're okay with ruminant animals. So again, beef, bison, lamb, and goat. But maybe they can also include things like, they might be able to include things like some pork, some poultry, maybe certain cuts. They may be able to include eggs, whether it's the whole egg or just the yolk, okay, as well as things like butter or ghee or lard. So those are all from animal sources, and they still perhaps have issues with seasonings and spices, giving them an inflammatory response. So that is what I eat, because I do have sensitivities, I do have intolerances. So what I eat primarily is fatty ground beef, sometimes steaks, occasionally lamb. We don't have access. We don't really get bison or goat here easily, so I don't eat that. I could try it, but we just don't have it really accessible here in the UK, not easily. So I don't eat it. As far as pork products, I stick to sausages without loads of extra fillers or extra spices. So in other words, I get them straight from the butcher. And for me, I can't do smoked or overly cured meats. Therefore, I can no longer do bacon, and I stay away from like salami, pepperoni, most deli meats. That's me. Okay, that's a category I fit into. And although I don't do well with egg whites, I do great with egg yolks. However, I can tolerate butter, so that is a part of my diet as well. Otherwise, I personally I hate fish, and I don't do very well with seafood. It causes a bit of a response that brings on inflammation in my body. I'm hypersensitive to it. I'm not quite sure why exactly, but that's just me. So I don't eat fish or seafood. I stay away from the over processed smoked and cured meats like deli meats. Have to avoid egg whites for the most part. And I do have a lactose intolerance, so I don't consume dairy outside of butter. That's me. That's another category of carnivore. Okay. So there are people who below that would be able to eat anything from the animal kingdom: fish, seafood, pork, poultry, ruminant animals like lamb, beef, bison, goat, probably elk, cantaloupe, maybe zebra in some parts of the world. I don't know. They can eat things like deer, so venison. Any of those types of meats, they seem to do well with if they can get access to it. They also seem to be able to eat deli meats without too many issues or responses. And if they have no dairy issues, such as a lactose intolerance or a full allergy, they can include milk and full fat milk and full fat dairy products like cheeses, okay, as well. And those are all considered part of a carnivore type diet. Again, depending on whether or not you tolerate them. Now, all of that would be considered typically a carnivore diet. Now, what I would like to come to in the next little bit is what about people who enjoy still having some of the non-starchy vegetables or the low carb, less sugar fruits? If they eat them, are they still technically carnivores? Yes, they are. Even somebody who was on a ketogenic protocol where 30% or less of what they're eating is coming from plants, they are still technically carnivores because the majority of what they're eating is coming from an animal source. That just means that in addition to eating mostly animal meats, they can include things like avocado, tomatoes, asparagus, broccoli, cauliflower, onions and garlic and mushrooms and all of those low carb or lower carb non-starchy vegetable options. And if you are able to eat those and enjoy them, go for it. You are still technically following a carnivore diet because you are getting 70% of your food or more from an animal source. So you can absolutely still enjoy some of the vegetables and some of the fruits, and you are still a carnivore. Your carnivore card is not taken away from you. Okay, so when people ask me, or when I'm asked, does everybody have to follow a carnivore diet? Technically speaking, if you are low carb, if you are following what falls under a ketogenic protocol, food-wise, okay, however, that only makes up a very small portion of your overall diet, then technically you are a carnivore. You are eating mostly animal sources of protein and fat. So when I'm talking about I think what people really want to know is, does everyone have to be a strict carnivore? No, you do not. Okay, you do not. And I will say that clearly. It has worked wonders for me. I know that Michaela Peterson, if I was to ask her in person, would say it has worked fantastic wonders for her. The more she's eliminated, the stricter she is, the better she feels, which is amazing. For me, I feel great with a less strict carnivore diet, which in my case means 100% of my nutrients are coming from animal sources. But again, if you still include some of those non-starchy fruits and vegetables, you are still a carnivore. And so I think ultimately, when we understand that the term carnivore can absolutely incorporate some vegetables and fruits, I think that opens it up to include a lot more people. So you do not have to be super strict carnivore and eliminate everything from your diet necessarily in order to have success. The most important thing that we need to get rid of, regardless of whether you want to follow what we would categorize a low carb keto approach or a more stricter meat and fat only approach, is this: we all need to get out the junk food in our diets. All the refined sugars, all the seed oils, all the highly processed starchy carbs, regardless of what approach you decide to take, those have to go. We have to get rid of them. That is key. And then everything else depends on what you tolerate and what you like, what you prefer. So I want to make that clear, because just because I am following a no vegetable, no fruit version of carnivore doesn't mean everyone else has to. If you do well with veggies and fruits, again, with the understanding that they should be non-starchy and low carb, and if you're going to keep some fruit in, as low in natural sugars as possible, because of course that does spike your insulin, then of course you can. And many people do and have incredible success with it. You do not have to give it all up necessarily. Now, if you are dealing with IBS or things like IBD or gut issues, you may need to remove those things, at least for a time. You may find that when you give your body time enough to heal, you may be able to slowly reintroduce those things back into your diet. And that's great. For some people, they are able to maintain this way of eating much longer term if they can include occasional vegetables or some berries or low carb fruit with the meats and the fats that they're eating. And I know it works because there's so many people out there who have done this in this great space who've had incredible success. And so when I ask the question, does everyone have to be carnivore? I think that's the best way. But I'm referring to the carnivore where you can have up to 30% of what you eat from a non-starchy, low-carb plant source. Okay? Again, depending on what you tolerate. I've learned through trial and much error and realizing I am not the exception to the rule that I don't do well with plants. Why? Because I have serious IBS symptoms if I do eat them, because many of these things will cause some degree of gas or bloating. And if you have IBS, it becomes even worse. Okay. So I have to avoid them personally, not because I don't like them, not because I didn't enjoy them, but because I just simply don't tolerate them. Who knows? There may come a day several years from now, perhaps, where my body has healed enough that I feel like I can maybe introduce some berries or low carb fruit back in. I'm going to avoid the vegetables because those cause me the most problems, but that's me. If you don't have gut issues and you enjoy those things and they're going to help you stick to this way of eating, then enjoy them. Now, these things, these fruits and vegetables that are non-starchy, that are lower carb, do still have carbohydrates in them. Okay, and carbohydrates will still cause a much more significant glucose response blood glucose response, as well as an insulin response. And so in order to lose weight, and get rid of body fat, we have to keep our insulin as low as possible. There's a moderate increase in both those things with protein, and there's a negligible increase when we're eating a lot of fat. Okay, so that's why higher fat is good, keeps you feeling full for longer, and you have a much less raise and increase in both your blood glucose response as well as your insulin. All good, because that's what allows our body to then burn and get rid of the fat that we're storing. Very important right there. So again, or not again, to keep in mind or to update, when we do consume, even though the vegetables and the fruit may be lower carb or very low carb, and of course you're avoiding the starches, which is great, there is still going to be a higher response, glucose response in the blood. So you are still going to have some increase in your insulin when you're eating carbohydrates. Having said that, if you're eating non-starchy, lower carb fruits and vegetables, it'll be far less than what you would get with the other starchy fruits and vegetables, starchy, highly sugary fruits and vegetables, and significantly less than if you're eating all the processed, highly refined sugars and prepackaged snacks and foods. Okay, so those are absolutely a better option. And that's fine. And you can have great healing and success by eating these things. So if you tolerate them and you enjoy them, and they're going to help you stick with an overall better diet as far as good sources of animal protein and fat, go ahead and include them. You're still going to find great results as long as you've cut out the processed, super inflammatory seed oils, sugars, and junk food. That is key. Regardless of whether we call ourselves strict carnivore, referring to the lion diet, or a highly, much more restricted meat and maybe eggs only approach because we've had to, because many of us cannot tolerate plant materials. That's fine. Or whether we are carnivore, but we still include some low carb stuff, we're all still carnivore. We are still getting most of our nutrition from an animal source. And I think ultimately that is what matters. And so we can choose to eat whatever we like. Does everyone have to be super strict and be red meat, water, and salt? No, we don't. Does that mean that everybody should continue to include low carb fruits and vegetables, even if they don't really tolerate them? No, you don't. There is somewhere in between these two ends of the carnivore range of options that works for each and every one of us. And that is what will give us the best health outcome, I believe. That's how we are designed to eat. That is what is nutritious. And that is what will give us the most healing. So that is kind of what I wanted to address today, because it's easy to think carnivore. Yes, we're meat eaters. We're meant to be meat eaters. Absolutely. How much and what types will depend on what we tolerate, what things we need to eliminate for gut health, for reducing inflammation, for healing, autoimmune or inflammatory diseases or conditions. And that is what should determine what amount of fruit and vegetable, if any, we have in our diets. But I want to make it clear that as long as you are, what I want to say is this, even if you still include some berries or low carb fruits and some non-starchy vegetables, you are still a carnivore because you're mostly eating meat with its fat. And so in the greater picture of things, yes, I think we should all be some degree of carnivore, wherever we fit in that range. We should all be some sort of carnivore because that is going to be the most healing. Whether that includes plants and dairy or it doesn't, there's somewhere in that range that is going to be beneficial for each and every one of us. So if you love your vegetables and you really like the non-starchy ones and they don't seem to bother you, enjoy them. That's okay. You are still part of the carnivore group. Okay. And I wanted to make that clear that all are welcome. That if you don't need to eliminate them, you don't have to. You will still have major benefits. And that's that's what this way of eating is supposed to be for, to provide us nutrition and health and healing and make the most of the animal sources of fat and protein that our bodies require. Okay, so if you are interested in doing some one-to-one coaching, which I can do with you guys, I offer that as through my website. I work with people from a whole wide range of different backgrounds in life, from people who have very limited mobility, who have very significant dietary issues and therefore have to eliminate all the plants, to people who are highly active, who are in fact elite athletes and actually can manage to have some non-starchy fruits and vegetables in their diets and thrive. So you do not have to eat the way that I do in order for us to work together, in order for you to have healing. So if you're interested, please go to the website, book a session, and I would love to work with you guys on one-to-one, and we can get healing together. That is it for today's topic. I thank you so much for your time, for coming back to the channel, for subscribing. Please continue to share your stories and leave your comments, and I enjoy hearing from you. Until the next video, guys, that is it for now. Take care, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye for now.